I'm Jim Edwardson, and long retired. I'm Emeritus Professor of Neuroendocrinology, but my chief involvement at the moment is as Chairman of the Newcastle University Retired Staff Association. I'm enthusiastic about aging and old age, and I think there's enormous potential in a retired staff association. I sometimes look at the group before COVID when we were gathered, and I think of all the intellectual capital and the experience and the connections that these people still have, and it's wonderful. And I think, we ought to harness that as well as keep in touch with one another. So that's why I'm really committed to this. I've volunteered all my life for various things. I think the first thing I volunteered for was the nature table monitor's job at junior school when I was 7. And that was tremendous. That's not been bettered, actually. That was a great experience. And I've been involved with the Alzheimer's Society, with the Natural History Society of Northumbria. And volunteering is just, first of all, it's fun. You get so much back, you make friendships, and it's a great experience to be part of a team, to be part of something bigger, particularly when it's really effective and going places. So it's actually also one of the 5 things that a big government scientific investigation about 10 years ago, a foresight report led by the Office of the Government Chief Scientist on Mental Health and Mental Well-being during the life course showed really kind of contributes to well-being, particularly as you age. So it's highly recommended. It should be one of your 5-a-day portions of mental health exercises. Aging and older people are quite a challenge across the globe. And I think for the university to have a group of people who are kind of in retirement themselves, but with connections with and affection for the university is a great thing. So I know many older people from the university help out in all sorts of ways in aging related studies. But I've long believed that actually to really respond to the challenge of aging, older people mustn't be regarded as a kind of a burden on the economy, which they're not actually, if you look at it, not as people who need to be cared for, but for the vast majority of us, people who do all sorts of things from grandparenting to voluntary work and so on. And I know 20 years ago, when the university, I think, first developed a strategy for public engagement, I suggested then that the universities generally could do far more with volunteers. And I think, given, first of all, the financial austerity which we've had for the last 10 years and the economic consequences of COVID, I think the argument for promoting volunteering, not to take other people's jobs away, but to complement that and to do things that the university would otherwise not be able to do as well. I think that's a great challenge. So I think it's wonderful that the university wants to promote volunteering and actively supports it. We've got quite an ambitious schedule. So just our experience of going through the pandemic, we've lost a year almost, but we now appreciate that by being online as well, we can involve retired staff who perhaps are housebound in Newcastle or live away from Newcastle, or just simply can't get to events on the days that we choose them. So going forward, we're definitely going to have, we hope anyway, face-to-face meetings like the old days with coffee afterwards, but we're also going to have online gatherings as well. And I think that's going to be useful in all sorts of ways. We've formed a partnership with something that was developed within the university called VOICE, which stands for Valuing Our Intellectual Capital and Experience. This is an online network of over 8,000 people and communities, and we want to work with them. They involve their members in thinking, in research, in discussion about sort of major issues, and I think it's quite an interesting and exciting prospect of getting public involvement into research priorities and programs and so on. So we're working with VOICE, and VOICE developed its work particularly around health and public and patient involvement in health services. But the arts and humanities are suffering greatly during the pandemic, and there are going to be consequences afterwards. And there are even threats from government that funding for arts and humanities might be reduced. So we want to get, our thinking hats on as to how we can best support arts and humanities in our own university, in our own city, and so on. So that's another initiative. And then one of the last sort of big things we want to do is put on a series of occasional lectures on the very theme of universities and the common good. And I think the public, everyone's aware now of the fact that it's universities that have developed the vaccines against COVID, and university research, which has steered the whole course of interventions to mitigate the pandemic. But actually, those of us in university life, we've known about this all our careers, and it's much more extensive. The contribution of universities pervades every area of life. And I think being able to kind of promote that is a luxury we can do in retirement that perhaps, university staff, particularly in their present challenges around teaching and so on, have less time to spend on. So that's another exciting direction. The bit that I've really fallen in love with during lockdown is the whole Helix site, which I think is splendid. I remember, I don't know how long ago it must have been, when Alan Johnson came as the science minister in the Labour government, and we put our hard hats on and our high-vis jackets and went round the site when it was still Newcastle Brewery being pulled down. And to see this vision realized and still growing, it's just fantastic. But I have to say that it almost gives me the impression sometimes that, we have several campuses, and I think there needs to be much more interchange between them. So I'm going to do as much as I can to encourage the Retired Staff Association to find as many excuses as it can to get to the Helix and find out what's going on there, and perhaps hold meetings there and so on, because I think it needs to be much more brought into the heart of the university. That's almost like a political thing to say. Of course, it's in the heart of the university. It's absolutely prestigious, and there are great plans for it, but that's where I like to hang out.